I want to talk a bit more about one of my last points from the previous video. I don't think I fully explained what exactly I meant when I said that the elements are not only biological, but also cultural. And this text box really didn't do any justice for my explanation. So let's talk about this scene with Iroh for a minute. The scene is ultimately focused on the idea that one can draw wisdom from the other elements to become more powerful themselves. The ability to redirect lightning was a technique that he learned from mimicking the waterbenders. And likewise, one could also expand their own knowledge in bending by drawing from those other elemental styles as well.
Understanding others, the other elements, and the other nations will help you become whole.
But there's a bit more to it than that. Listen to how he words his explanation about the elements.
The people of the Earth Kingdom are diverse and strong. They are persistent and enduring. The people of the Fire Nation have desire and will, and the energy and drive to achieve what they want. The air nomads detached themselves from worldly concerns and found peace and freedom. The people of the Water Tribe are capable of adapting to many things. They have a deep sense of community and love that holds them together through anything.
You see what he's doing here? He's not just talking about the elements as a bending style, but also about the cultures of the four nations. The styles of bending are reflected in the people of those respective elements, even those who aren't benders themselves. Bending isn't just something you're born with because one of your parents was also a bender. It's also something that's intrinsic to your culture and your people. And that is precisely why the Avatar, why Rava, would have to live with the people of each element in order to learn how to use them. The Avatar's ability to draw wisdom from past lives could be compared to Iroh's wisdom that he drew from the waterbenders. And thus, Rava would have to have lived the lives of someone from each of the four nations before her Avatar could bend all four elements. Speaking of which, let's talk about the next Avatar. Rava searched for an answer on a piece of land that had gone nearly untouched by the spirits. How something like this was even possible baffled her, and so she had to learn why. The land was home to a series of human tribes known as the Sun Warriors, who had learned the ways of firebending. As for why the land hadn't been attacked by the spirits, while the lion turtles and the power of fire was certainly a great weapon against them, it was the mighty dragons that gave them the edge to push them back. The dragons and the Sun Warriors coexisted to help one another. Neither could defeat the spirits alone, so the Sun Warriors learned from the dragons, and the dragons were given homes to call their own, as well as the unwavering loyalty and devotion of the Sun Warriors. Avatar Wan was one such warrior, mastering the ways of firebending in ways that impressed even his peers. One night, Lee came to him in a dream, much like how Rava did to Lee. He told Wan everything about Rava and his past life, as well as the troubles his people faced against the spirits, and begged him to seek them out and help them. Wan agreed and left his people to seek out the land of his past. There he learned the ways of earthbending, the ways of his former people, and used firebending to push back the spirits. But he alone wasn't enough. So when he returned to his family and friends of the Sun Warriors, he returned with new companions he made and asked both the Sun Warriors and the dragons to help. And for the first time in human history, all of humanity was united, even if only against a common foe. And so, the spirits were pushed back, and the war was won. Avatar Wan died happy, and Lee could finally sleep peacefully knowing that their people were finally free of the spirits. But Rava was not satisfied. If anything, this only made her feel worse. As if the supposed death of their leader's daughter wasn't enough, the spirits might never forgive the humans for this loss, and their resentment would only grow. Though Rava wished peace for the humans, now she had to mend relations with the spirits and hopefully her father. If not because she felt it right to do, then because she knew her father would return one day to wipe out all of humanity. But how could a human befriend a spirit, especially after a war had just ended between the two? If a human could even do such a thing, she thought, they must be in the most remote and tranquil mountains on Earth. And there, she found the first airbending monks. Her next life, she would be reincarnated as an airbender named I-Ching. Being an air nomad, I-Ching had many opportunities to learn about the other bending styles after mastering her own. and it was because of her usage of multiple elements that she became revered by her fellow monks, for they knew there was only one other person who had the ability to bend more than one element. Despite this, however, I-Ching only ever mastered airbending, and in fact spent more of her time learning spirit bending than either fire or earth. Instead, much of her time was spent trying to spiritually detach herself from the world in hopes of traveling to the spirit world. In time, she was successful, and spent much of her life in the spirit world. This was a mistake both I-Ching and Rava would later regret. I-Ching's goal was to mend the spirit's relations with humans as much as possible. Her early years in the spirit world, she ran from most of the spirits that tried to expel her from their home. But eventually, she gained allies, some of whom she was able to convince of her true identity. Many spirits began to believe that their beloved Rava was actually alive, but not all spirits were convinced, Vaatu especially. Though he began to recognize a correlation between Rava and I-Ching, as well as her past lives, he instead saw this as an even greater offense. Whatever this Avatar was, he believed it was an abomination that had to die if he was going to find Rava. And once again, Vaatu refused to hear Rava's call. Vaatu's plans extended beyond simply destroying I-Ching, however, for unbeknownst to the Avatar, the Earth Kingdom was beginning to form, and the friendship that its people once shared with the Sun Warriors was weakening as the two of them began to fight over territory. It would inevitably turn to war, and when their forces are too weak and preoccupied, Vaatu would strike once more. Luckily, I-Ching saw through this deception and eventually returned to the physical world, but by that time it was too late. It was hard enough to keep the two tribes from killing one another, but she could barely hold off Vaatu and his army when they arrived. Her attempts to maintain peace were little more than futile, and in the end she died before she could prevent the battle from meeting its bloody conclusion. The Sun Warriors ultimately surrendered the greater chunk of the land to the Earth Kingdom, but not before hatred would begin to brew in the hearts of those whose loved ones were lost in battle. But it was because of this hatred and conflict that caused the Lion Turtles to abandon the humans. They would not be toys to their battles, not so long as humanity continued to fight amongst itself. They did this in hopes that it might sway humanity from their violent ways, but the conflict between the two people was far from over, especially with Vaatu. His anger was possibly the greatest of anyone's after the fallout of the battle. Rava vowed that her next incarnation would never detach themselves from the human world. But this created a problem. How could she devote herself to both her people and the humans? The answer? A series of tribes that had begun sprouting in a place that had gone previously unnoticed by her for centuries. Not a piece of land, but rather a gigantic chunk of ice floating at the North Pole. And its people were living and learning in peace alongside spirits that taught them how to bend water. If she was to learn how humans and spirits could get along, it would be here. Kalla was a waterbender, and much like her past lives, she excelled at her element of origin. And much like those lives before her, she began to realize her responsibility and duty as the Avatar when those lives contacted her. And though Kalla quickly mastered waterbending, she was worried, as was Rava. Both of them knew that Vaatu would return one day, and a confrontation was all but inevitable. But with the fractured relationship between the Sun Warriors and the Earth Kingdom, the strength of her own forces may not be enough to overcome Vaatu's. Kalla sought wisdom from Tui and La. She learned that they were not the only spirits to come to the mortal realm and make it their home. Vaatu's forces may not be as opposing to humans as one might think. They grow tired of prolonged battles just as anyone else would. And I-Ching's attempts to reach them during her life wasn't in vain. It could still be possible to convince them to stop this madness, or at least enough of them that the rest could be manageable. And the key to that would be to gain the trust of the other native spirits of the earth. Kalla left the water tribe to seek out teachers for the other elements. During her journey, she sought out spirits like Heibai, Wan Shitong, the Painted Lady, or, spirits like them. Even some spirits loyal to Vaatu began to listen to her, and peace between humans and the spirits seemed more and more evident. In time, more and more spirits left Vaatu's rule. Fewer barriers were maintained between the two worlds as spirits started losing trust in their former king. Even those who held disdain for humans didn't see the need for more death over a war that seemed more and more unnecessary. But Vaatu's rage would not be quenched. He would wage a war on the Avatar no matter how many or how few would join him. And so, Kalla came face to face with the spirit of heaven once again. She begged him that this had to end, and that if he only listened to her, this would all be over. But once again, Vaatu heard only silence. The battle was perhaps fiercer than any of her past lives. Vaatu would have won too had Rava not had a plan for her father. She linked Kalla's spirits with those of her past lives. All their experience, all their knowledge of bending, all of their power combined was accessible to her at that very moment. The first Avatar state. Though the battle was still close, Vaatu and what remained of his army were ultimately pushed back, and the Earth was spared his wrath. So let's pull the pen out of that last conversation and continue where we left off. Why is the Order of the Elements the way it is? And why is it so important? Once again, much like the first Avatar was chosen, it doesn't feel like the Order in the original had anything significant to do with, well, anything. One could have gone to any of the lion turtles in any order. So why is this order so important? It's not just the order in which the Avatar is reincarnated either. It's the order in which they master the elements. So why is it handled with about as much care as everything else in this origin? In my version, there's a very specific and clear reason for the order in which things are done, and it corresponds to how the greatest conflict in the history of the Earth was ended. Earth was the first of the elements because it was the foundation for the rest. It is sturdy, enduring, stubborn, and strong. The war could not be won by soldiers if those soldiers didn't have a good defense against the spirits. But defense alone is not enough to win. Fire is the next logical step. It is aggressive, tenacious, energetic, and powerful. Between the strength of earth and the force of fire, victory could be achieved, but only of the physical battle. Air is peaceful, lively, and free-flowing. Only an airbender could reach out to the spiritual world and calm the aggression held against humans. And water was the final and most important of the four. Water is calm, adaptive, cool, and loving. And it would take that adaptive and loving nature to mend relations between humans and spirits, so that they might coexist, even if only to some extent. This is why the Order is the way it is. Even if Mike, Brian, Aaron, and all the other writers never planned for this from the beginning, it makes me sad that so little thought actually went into the final product of something as pivotal as the origin of the Avatar. So much of this character has been built on the mystery of the Avatar and their relation to the spirit world. But now that that mystery is ruined, we can't even say we got a good origin story out of it. Time passed and Kalla's duties continued with maintaining peace amongst her fellow man. Rava wished she could have reached her father, but even had she been successful, the Avatar would still need to, be a thing. She thought that Kalla would be the last, that peace between spirits and humans could be achieved, but she had no idea how hard a task that truly was. More than that, her direct connection with Kalla wasn't as strong as it was with Lee. She couldn't say the same for any of her past lives after Lee either. Whoever would come after Kalla, Rava feared that she might be forgotten. So Lee, Wan, I-Ching, and Kalla swore that they would mentor the next Avatar, and they in turn would guide the Avatars after that. She thanked them and left them with the Avatar state, the one weapon that could defeat Vaatu and their ace in the hole. Vaatu would later return long after Kalla had passed on, but each time he did, the Avatar would be stronger than they were before. The Avatar state had more avatars from which the current user could draw power and knowledge from, and thus Vaatu's attempts became easier and easier to foil. Even his allies eventually all but gave up until only he had the strength to continue. And then, well, nothing. Just as his allies had given up, Vaatu had done so as well. He was eventually forgotten by the Avatar, but for the millennia that passed, he never forgot, and neither did Rava. Now, I don't intend to rewrite the rest of Korra anytime soon, but here's how I would write the connection between Beginnings and my version of Korra. The 100 years that Aang was absent from the world was enough time for Vaatu to take note and hide somewhere on Earth, where he would prepare for his inevitable return to end the Avatar once and for all. And all conflict in the Legend of Korra would stem entirely from Vaatu's presence. This is because I find it incredibly coincidental that harmonic convergence just so happens to line up with the Avatar preceding Aang. Maybe you don't find it coincidental, but I'd like to believe that the events in the previous series, or at least the events between them, played some part in causing all the trouble in the series to follow. So, in conclusion, this is how I would have liked for the origin of the Avatar to have been. Again, this isn't exactly my final redraft of this story, and I do think it's subject to change even now. But no matter how drastically it's changed from how it is now, here are the parts I think are important to keep and why they're done better than the current origin presented in the Legend of Korra. 1. Establish Vaatu and Rava as the spirits of heaven and earth. This is to maintain consistency with what the Avatar has always been the Avatar of, and it also gives Vaatu comprehensive motivation. Due to his misbelief that the humans have stolen his daughter away to create the Earth and views the Avatar as a twisted perversion of what used to be Rava, he wants to destroy them both, whereas the original Vaatu was evil just for the sake of it. 2. Explain the meaning behind the Avatar cycle and the Order of Mastery, as well as giving meaning to the first Avatar in the cycle, as their element of origin should have the closest ties to the spirit that they embody. The original describes no level of importance to either of these things, since the Avatar could have come from any of the lion turtles and could have learned the elements in any particular order. 3. Demonstrate the origin of the Avatar state and how it came to be in a way that is consistent with what has been established. That being that it derives its power from the past lives of the Avatar cycle, and thus shouldn't be applicable until after at least one Avatar has died and passed the torch on to the next, which adds further credence to the idea of dividing the origin amongst 4 Avatars instead of 1. And finally, demonstrate spirit bending and all of its applications in a pre-Avatar world, keeping consistency with the lion turtle from the finale of The Last Airbender, and also elaborating on why it fell out of use despite its useful applications. Okay, reading through this script a second time, I neglected to explain that last part as adequately as I should have. So I'll just add that last bit here. The 2 main uses for spirit bending were to survive the harshness of the wasteland and to kill spirits that threatened human settlements. And between the creation of the Earth and the end of the Great Spirit War, there wasn't much reason to keep it around. But that doesn't account for how useful it was despite this fact, especially given its application yet to be discovered. So to answer this question, once again, I will refer to a scene from The Last Airbender.
Energy, your own spirit must be unbendable, or you will be corrupted and destroyed.
Because of the nature of spirit bending, it was considered much more difficult to master than the other elements. If there were any masters at all, they would either be lion turtles or very few in number. This also contributed to the preferred usage of elemental bending styles, since those didn't risk the destruction of the user upon usage, and adding more reason why spirit bending was lost to the ages. I should also reiterate that it was only the combination of elemental and spirit bending styles that the war was won. Neither could have won the war alone, because spirits can't be harmed by physical means, but there weren't enough adept spirit benders to defeat them alone either. Needless to say, I have a lot to say about Korra, and Avatar in general, and I get the feeling there will only be more to talk about as time goes on. But I'm still experimenting with what I want my channel to be. Maybe I might come back to Korra, but there are other things I'd like to talk about, and this might not be what I should focus my channel around. Still, I began working on this video all the way back in August, and I certainly wasn't going to leave it incomplete for all the work I put into it. But I want to hear what you guys think. I want to know what you think worked about this rewrite, and what didn't. So let me know in the comments below. If you're a part of a Discord far, far away, I'm always up for a chat if you want to at me, even if it's not about Avatar. Now, I'm going to continue taking things slow with the holidays just around the corner. With all that said, have an excellent day, a happy Thanksgiving, and in case I forget to say it, a Merry Christmas, and stay platinum.